What's up everybody, it's PhoneArena. You're watching our in-depth video review of the Apple iPad 2, the latest tablet device on the market. It's available right now through various retailers out there. It sports a $500 cost for the Wi-Fi only version of the tablet, 16 gigabytes. There are also the 32 and also 64 gigabyte capacities available. And if you're interested as well, you get the 3G versions for AT&T or Verizon, and you pay just a little bit more money for that. And it's available in black and white as well. So it sports a lot of new stuff under the hood, such as the 1 gigahertz Apple A5 dual-core processor. It has also front-facing and also rear-facing camera, so you can do video chat and take photos. And it still pretty much retains a nice-looking design, a razor-thin profile, and hopefully it has what it takes to really stem the tide of the recent Android tablets out there in the market. So we'll check it out and see what it has to offer. Without a doubt, the first thing that really captures our attention with the iPad 2 is its razor-thin profile. It's very magnificent, to say the least, just because it's 33% thinner than the previous model. Measures in 0.34 inches thick, which is thinner than the half-an-inch thickness of the original iPad. At the same time, the weight has dropped to only 1.3 pounds, slightly less, and it still retains the same battery life. But for the most part, as you can tell, it doesn't really sway too far away from the design of the original. You have the bezel outlining the touchscreen here, and on the back you have that solid brushed aluminum casing that really gives it a premium feel when you hold on to it. It does repel dirt and debris and even scratches a little bit better than plastic casings out there. It's nice. We have some tapered edges all around, so it's comfortable to hold, evenly balanced, and overall it is very spectacular just because of its very thin profile. Probably attributed to cost more than anything else, the iPad 2 utilizes the same exact screen as its predecessor. You have the 9.7-inch IPS display, same exact resolution, 1024 by 768 pixels. So even though there are some tablets out there in the market that have higher resolution displays, it's still quite good here on the iPad 2. You're still able to make out even the tiniest of text. You don't have too much of a problem, pretty sharp. We like the clarity it has to offer. And on top of that, the color production is quite natural. You could tell by the rich colors. It sports some really nice viewing angles, so anywhere you look at it, it pretty much retains its visibility. In outdoor conditions, we didn't have any problems using it as well. And you do have that olaphobic coating, so if you just get a cloth, you could easily clean it. Beneath its display, you have its recognizable springy home button. We like the tactile response it has to offer, and on top of that, it's very easy to press. Meanwhile, we now find a front-facing VGA camera on board, so it allows you to do video chat and even take self-portraits. If you happen to pick up the AT&T's version of the iPad 2, you'll find the micro SIM card slot located to the upper left corner of the device. You have the pinhole there to access the slot. Well, on the right edge of the iPad 2, you have the switch here that'll silence the sounds, and on top of that, you have the volume rocker. It's the same exact feel as the previous model, and we do like its response when you press it down. We find the 3.5mm headset jack on the top edge of the iPad 2. If you have to pick up AT&T or Verizon's version, you'll have this black strip for the 3G modem. You have the microphone right there, and over here you have the raised dedicated power button, which has a really nice feel and solid response when you press it down. Again, we find the 30-pin connection port at the bottom of the iPad 2. Alongside it, you have the notches here for the speaker, which is placed more at an angle. And finally, as you can tell from the back, you have the prominent Apple logo placed squarely in the middle. On the upper left corner of the device, you have the rear camera. It has a maximum still shot resolution of 960 by 720 pixels, which basically translates to something less than a 0.7 megapixel count. As we mentioned already, the iPad 2 packs a dual-core Apple A5 processor, and on Apple's website, it is stated as running at the clock speed of 1 gigahertz, so it does offer a pretty good response here when you're doing some normal functions, such as scrolling between the home screen here, or launching a web browser and doing pinch gestures or kinetic scrolling. You're not going to notice too much of a difference between it and the previous model, but for more processor-intensive applications such as gaming, you do notice that it just offers a better experience, a little bit more fluid movement in general. Sadly, the biggest complaint that we have with the iPad 2's release is that the iOS experience remains the same. There's nothing major in terms of functionality with it. It's running the latest version of the platform, which is iOS 4.3. It's very straightforward and simplistic, very easy to understand for anyone out there. With the main menu here, the home screen, it's laid out in typical grid-like form. You have your icons here. There's a little bit of personalization, but it's very, very slim. You can rearrange the icons, change the background wallpaper. You can make folders and all that. It's very little compared to what you see with Android 3.0 Honeycomb with its live wallpapers and its widgets. You also have multitasking elements involved here, so you could quickly move between various open applications. In the leftmost home screen, you have also the Spotlight feature, which does aggregate content as you begin to type up. But all in all, it's still a stagnant experience. It's definitely starting to show its age. We would just like to see, hopefully in the future, that Apple take a really step forward in improving the experience, such as the notification systems with it. So here's the calendar, and it's laid out identical to what we've seen previously. It takes advantage of the entire length of the display. As you can tell, you can view it by month, you have by week, and of course you also have by day. And with the day view, it's nice to see that you have your agenda right here on the right hand side and a mini calendar on the left hand side. Definitely helps. And adding different, you could easily set up a new appointment by clicking the plus sign down here at the bottom right corner. Again, the layout of the address book is the same exact thing here. On the left panel here, you have your scrollable listing, and on the right side, it'll display all the pertinent information with each contact. You could simply set up a new one here by hitting the plus arrow, and you could associate a lot of pertinent information with each person. But in fact, it's pretty much the same, nothing different about it. We're agreed to a familiar layout here with the email application. It uses a two-pane system. The left side here shows you all your folders and also your accounts, while the right side, it will show you the actual email. Setting up email address is not a problem with the iPad 2. Generally, it requires just your username and password and automatically set up, but in some instances, it might require some additional information. We just like the ability to quickly move between different accounts quickly and just lays it out in a very familiar fashion. Thanks to the reasonably sized display, it makes typing out messages no problem on the iPad 2. As you can tell, we have the landscape option here, which is the preferred method. It's very responsive to the touch and very quick, and we can start speed typing very quickly here. If you need to add additional punctuation or characters, you gotta press the button right here. It gives you all that. When you switch it to portrait though, it's a little bit more cramped than anything else, and you gotta hold it with both hands and use your thumbs mostly, although that there's a lot more travel required by your thumbs, and definitely the landscape option is the preferred method. We've got Google Maps running right here, and it's basically the same. Again, you have a map here. You could switch it to different views from classic to satellite to give you a bird's eye view of the location. You could pinch zoom, obviously. Unfortunately, it doesn't have rotate or 3D map views, but it does have things like street view, so you could see the location ahead of time to know where you're going exactly. But when you compare it to Android, it still doesn't have things like free voice-guided turn-by-turn directions or integration with other applications such as Latitude or Buzz. If you love watching YouTube videos, you'll find the client on the iPad 2 to be especially useful just because it shows you, it'll play the video itself, and you have the relevant information right here at the bottom left pane. And also you have other pertinent content such as related videos, more from the same user, and also the comments directly all on there. So it's pretty nice, although you have to connect to the Wi-Fi to get high quality videos. If you're on 3G, it will only play in normal quality. So if you're into reading books, you'll find the Ibooks app especially useful. When you launch it here, you have your library. We'll just select one here, and it breaks down to the left and right panel, so you get the full look of the actual book. You could swipe over, as you can tell here, for each page. And there are some other functionalities, such as if you hold down something, you can look up a definition or highlight it. You might just want to lower down the brightness just to make it a little bit easier on your eyes, though. Much like a lot of things with the iPad 2, the music player remains the same. There's nothing really different about it. It's broken down by songs, artists, albums, genres, and composers. If you select a specific album cover here, it'll display all the relevant songs with it. And when you play one, it's going to show you the album cover, on-screen controls, and even track information. On the bottom right here, you could access again the track listing with each person. Now, in order to change the equalizer settings, you can access it from the application itself. You got to go to Settings, go down to the iPod, and you'll be able to change that from there. As far as the audio quality from the speaker, it's very loud and strong output, and didn't crackle at the loudest volume setting. Mainly because of its 4:3 aspect ratio, you might have some difficulty in converting over videos on your computer to the iPad 2, but the one we have here is an MPEG-4 640 by 480 resolution. As you can tell, the quality is more than respectable. It moves at a nice frame rate, very steady, no evidence of any lag or slowdown with it. Color production is spot on and very bright and brilliant, and makes for a great companion on the road. As we mentioned already, the iPad 2's rear camera has a maximum still shot resolution of 960 by 720 pixels, so it translates to less than a 0.7 megapixel count. As you can tell with the interface of the camera, it's pretty much a direct port of what's seen on the iPhone. The biggest annoyance that we have is when you're trying to take a shot, you're holding it steady with both hands, left and right, and when trying to access the on-screen shutter key, your thumb has to travel a lot of space to get there. It'd been better to see it either on the left or right-hand sides here. It's not that much of a problem in portrait just because there's less travel for your thumbs. But everything else pretty much identical. You have the gallery right here. You could switch the toggle to do video or still shots, front-facing camera. Instead of touch focus, you now have exposure adjustment. So when you click a specific area, it'll adjust the exposure. Unfortunately, you're not going to want to use the iPad 2 to take some shots with it, just because the quality is pretty horrendous. There's barely any details, it's kind of muddy looking, color can be a little bit off depending on the exposure, and to top it off, when you're using it in low lighting situations, there's just an abundance of digital noise that which really lessens the overall quality, so you're better off just using a regular camera for that. Thankfully, the iPad 2's 720p video capture is a little bit more agreeable with us. That's just because it shoots at a frame rate of 29 frames per second, so it is pretty buttery smooth as far as its playback is concerned. It lacks continuous autofocus, obviously, so for close-ups, it tends to look a little bit out of focus or fuzzy even, but for the most part, general use, most people will probably be happy with its output. One of the more novel things about the iPad 2 is the Photobooth app on here on the home screen. So when you launch it, it quickly gives you this 9-panel interface that shows you all the nifty photo effects that are applied to the shot here. So we'll go through them. The first one here is the X-ray. You have one for a light tunnel. You have one that stretches the image. You can tell. You have a mirror, so it either duplicates whatever is on screen. You have also twirl mode. You have even a thermal camera on board. Kaleidoscope feature, and of course last the squeeze. So it definitely gives you nice photo effects, more on the comical side at first, but after a while it just becomes a little bit more novel than anything else. Thanks to the inclusion of cameras, both the front-facing one and also the rear camera, you have the ability to do FaceTime on the iPad 2. Now, we have it connected already to FaceTime chat, so I'll quickly launch it. We connected via email just because there's no phone number attached to the iPad 2 here. We have it, again, set up with an iPhone 4, and the only limitation is still that you need to be connected to Wi-Fi in order to use it. But the great thing about it is that it's pretty responsive. As you can tell, as we're moving, it captures pretty good amount of movement here. It's very responsive, but the quality is a little bit on the pixelated side just because of the size of the iPad's display. But luckily, the audio quality when you're talking is pretty good, and overall, it's definitely one of the better services out there in the market. If you easily want to share content that's stored locally on the iPad 2, you might want to consider picking up the optional $39 digital AV adapter for it. Basically, you connect it to the bottom of the iPad 2 right here, and of course there's a spot here for an HDMI cable. You connect your high-definition television to it. Now what it does, it basically will mirror the iPad 2's display onto your high-definition television. So you could run things like the music player, you could also browse the web, and even read emails, and it even has the ability to output 1080p videos, and it works pretty well, and we're surprised that it's pretty responsive too. Of course, Apple touts that the iPad 2 is capable of giving 10 hours of battery life for just watching videos, but in our normal usage, real-life world usage, we disconnected the 3G connection and just strictly use Wi-Fi. We set the brightness to 50%, and we managed to get 2 solid days use out of the iPad 2 before it required another charge. So for light users, you'll definitely get a lot more time, but the great thing about it is even for heavy users out there, you'll probably be more than capable of getting a solid day out of the iPad 2. So there's no denying that Apple's going to sell a ton of the iPad 2s thanks to its stellar $500 pricing for the 16GB Wi-Fi only model, and it truly sets the pace for everything else out there. With that, you get some moderate improvements in the hardware department, specifically the 1GHz dual-core Apple A5 processor. You have the addition of the camera, so you have video chat enabled here, and on top of that, it has that nice stellar-looking design that has that very thin profile all around, which makes it one of the more appealing tablets right now. But after all that, the only stagnant thing that we find with it is just the platform experience. It's iOS in its true form. It hasn't really evolved. And when compared to things like what we see out of Android, it's definitely starting to look a little bit slim in comparison, specifically the lack of personalization with the home screen. It's granted it is nice and simple, but it would be even better if they make some marked improvements in those categories, even things like the notification systems. But nonetheless, it's still a great tablet in its own right. So if you'd like to learn more about the Apple iPad 2, or for all the latest cell phone reviews, news specs, and information, you could check us out, PhoneArena.com.